Now I need to decide what shape of blade I want. This is how I roughed out the shape. I drew an initial line from the midpoint to here, and then another line all the way from the top of the blade down to this point here where it intersects with the original line. I've made a nasty mistake here. I don't think I can just leave it. I'm going to have to sort that out before I can go much further. And the way I propose to do it is by welding in a piece of steel and then cutting it off. Now I know that does look horrible now, but I can assure you that it really won't look much better once I've ground off all the slag and weld. There, as promised, it really doesn't look all that much better. Now for the other side, there, that should do it. This is what will become the crossguard. It's 8 inches long, the tang's 20mm wide, so I've put two 1mm drill holes 20mm apart to define the ends of the slot which I'm going to try and broach through this to accept the tang. Here's the cross piece in the forge. In order to punch through the red hot mild steel, I'm using this homemade tool which is a cut down wood chisel. I meant to film myself doing it, but you have to strike while the iron's hot, and there just isn't time to turn on the camera. Still, we are through. Now let's see whether our tang fits through there. I had to file the crossguard out a little and then knock it into place with a hammer, but here it is on the tang. It's going to be a big sword. I'm going to cut a small slot in the end of the tang so that I can weld this little piece of threaded bar into position to take the pommel when the time comes. While I'm at it, while I've got the welder out, I'm going to take advantage of the opportunity to fix this, the last remnant of the unfortunate nick that I took out of the blade when I was trimming it to size. So that's the stud bar welded into position. Here's the nick in the edge of the blade. You can still see part of the nick, but at least I've got the end secured to the main body of the blade now. As I'm going to be relying on an angle grinder to refine the shape of the blade and give it its final cross section, I've come up with a system whereby I've tied the sword at either end to a piece of timber which is narrower than the sword blade and is resting on top of a table, so I can get in with my grinder either way. I can't work on the very tip without moving the wire. With the sword tied down, I've been able to get really aggressive with the big angle grinder and start to put a real profile on it. So at last the blade's starting to get the right profile. I seem to have come up with the finished shape for the blade pretty much involuntarily. This is a broad, flat triangle which is coming to a point now. After this point the blade is a simple biface. I didn't mean to do that. I was planning to do a biface all the way along, but it occurs to me that if I do, I'll have quite a weak blade because it is only 5mm thick. A sword like this would start by the hilt at around 8mm thickness and then taper distally, in other words in this plane, towards the tip. I can't do that as my sword blade's so thin, so to get the right balance I've been relying on this heavily tapered blade which is 2 inches wide at the top. I'm going to start doing some more shaping work on the crossguard. The first thing I want to do is scallop in a little bit here and here to accentuate the bulge where the crossguard flares out to encompass the blade. And there it is after I've done it. Hopefully the effect is quite subtle, but it does accentuate this bulge, which is what I wanted to do. Here's the crossguard after a few minutes with the flat wheel on the small grinder. That's the underside. I'm quite pleased with the view from above and below, but I'm still not really sure what to do about the side view. You can see I've removed a little material here and here, as if I were going to do this. I think it's time to stop, have a cup of tea, and Google image search crossguards. Here's the crossguard. I've been trying to give it a similar shape when viewed from above and below as that you get when you view it from the side. So I've just basically removed material from here and here most of all, and then flared out towards the end. I want to keep the crossguard simple. I've been working on the blade. What I've been trying to do is refine the edge so that on either side it comes to a peak and we don't have a broad flat edge to look at. Now I've done that, I think it's time to move away from the angle grinder and towards the bench sander. Last time I made a sword, I polished the blade by fastening this with cable ties upside down to a garden bench, thus turning it into, I reasoned, a bench grinder. It did very well and it finished the sword, but then I'm afraid its health took a turn for the worst. So much so that if I switch it on now, all it does is this. Well, that's not good enough. So today I nipped out and bought this. All I have to do to convert this to a bench grinder is cable tie it upside down to the arm of a garden bench, and I carry on with the polishing. I fitted 80 grit paper. There you go, bench sander. Right, let's have a quick look. This side of the sword hasn't yet been touched by the bench sander, and this side has had a quick going over with 80 grit emery cloth. So, it's certainly effective. Having used 80 grit and then 100, I'm just going up to 120. As it's made of stainless steel, although it's very thin, this blade is quite heavy. It's going to need a serious pommel, especially as it has quite a short tang, to get it to balance around 4 inches or 100 millimeters from the crossguard. So I've ordered the makings of a serious pommel. I found this in West Germany, and it is a 2-inch or 50mm ball of soft iron. So I hope that's more than heavy enough, and I might even have to remove weight from it in order to make it serve as our pommel. The next thing I need to consider is the hand grip. I'll be making mine from wood, but since making my first sword I've learned that round section hand grips are a bit of a no-no, because they don't help the user of the sword know where the edge is. So they don't help with edge alignment. It's as easy to hit like that as it is like that. So I mustn't make it round. This wood is sold as a board for meat of some sort, and as you can see there are 2 thin pieces there, and the nature of the wood is Nogal Norte Americano. Here's the piece once removed from the packet. This is the thickness. I think that's probably about right. Interestingly, I've just noticed that my North American walnut, which came labelled in Spanish, is actually from Hamburg in Germany. Oh, I think we're looking at about this width. These should clip round the tang, something like that. You saw me using a drill to scallop them out with a grindstone, and you may have wondered why I don't simply use a wood chisel, and the answer is that I sacrificed the only wood chisel I could find to punch through this crossguard, so I'm having to use power tools to empty this out. In order to carry on with the handle, I really need to glue the two halves to the tang, and in order to do that I have to first fit this crossguard, so I'm going to give it a quick last polish with the highest grit sandpaper I can find, and then epoxy it into place. I'm aiming through the camera. Right. Better get that cleaned up before it goes off. The crossguard has been epoxied on. I haven't actually tried the side scales to see how well they fit around the tang. I did have to shorten them a little because I haven't really got that much of this threaded bar sticking out to take the pommel, and it is a big heavy pommel, so I didn't want the handle to be any longer than it need be, thus reducing the length of this, the effective length of this. Okay, I ran out of my usual fast epoxy. I thought I only had 24-hour stuff, but eventually managed to find enough posh expensive 10-minute epoxy to do this now. Now, to start putting some sort of shape on this. On the posh videos you'd see the bloke walk up to a bandsaw, but as you've probably guessed, I don't have a bandsaw. I have an angle grinder. I do everything with my angle grinder. I'd shave with it if I could. So I'll get back to you when I've made a lot of noise and dust and turn this into something more handle shaped. Bearing in mind, of course, that I need to leave flats on either side to facilitate edge alignment, as if this weren't a purely decorative wall hanger. I'm afraid I haven't done this all that well. There's quite a gap there. If we keep going round, this gap isn't even square. So I'm going to have to do more when the time comes. This is as far as I dare go with the grinder. I'm going over to the bench sander. On my last sword, when I reached this stage, I glued on the pommel, painted the handle black and called it finish. But this time I'd like to do it a little differently. I'd like to have a go at leather wrapping the handle, but the only piece of leather I have available is the back of this old leather waste bag thing. So I'm going to cut that, and if it is big enough, if it will wrap all the way around the handle, I'll do a leather wrapped handle. If not, I'll have to think of something else. What I got from the back was this. I cut one of the ends off and found, to my pleasure, that yes, it is big enough to go all the way around. So it looks as though we are going to have a leather wrapped handle. I think I need to go and watch some YouTube videos about how to do this before I carry on. I've just noticed something quite amusing. At the very left here we have the H-E-R of leather, then a long Japanese word, you can pronounce that yourself, and some Japanese characters. So it seems that we have American walnut handle, shipped via Germany, a British stainless blade, and a Japanese leather handle wrap. This is a truly cosmopolitan sword. What I've done so far is to glue on a thin initial strip with epoxy, and I've discovered that I have to stretch the leather slightly to get it to match up. I want to butt it up against this with no overlap if I can. I'm going to use PVA wood glue for this and then wrap it in string. In some of the sword making videos I've watched, the twine wrap which is temporarily applied to the grip while the glue sets is such a thing of beauty that I'm saddened to see it come off. Mine isn't like that. I'm going to show you where the two edges butt. It's here. Obviously there's very little space, but I'm hoping that there are no bright slices of walnut peeking through once I pull the twine off. As I use PVA glue on the hand grip, it's going to take quite a while to dry, so I may as well start work on the pommel. Though the first job isn't going to be to polish it, I know I will get to that, and I'm going to start with 80 grit. And it occurred to me that if I were to cover the back surface in clear parcel tape, it might last a bit longer, because I usually replace these sheets not because the sandpaper's worn away, but because they break. So reinforcing them might make each one last longer. The first thing I need to do with the pommel is to grind a small flat on it, which I can centre punch, and then drill into it to the depth of the small threaded protrusion that comes off the end of the tang. Once I've got that done, I'll be able to slide it into position and try the balance of the sword to see whether I actually need the full weight of this pommel or whether I'll have to remove some mass from it somehow. I do have a drill bit of the correct size to drill the pommel, but it turns out to have a snapped off tip. Fortunately, I have an angle grinder. Here's a crudely reground drill bit, and here's the pommel. Somewhere on it there's a centre punch mark. Right there. Before going any further with the pommel, I'm cutting a little leather end cap to fit over this and just close it off with leather. I'm not actually sure whether this is considered good practice, but it seemed a sensible way to finish off the top to me. And although I personally love this finish, I'm going to polish it to make it look more like the rest of the sword. So now's the chance to try out my sticky tape reinforced 80 grit paper. This is more or less where the sword balances, with the pommel in position. It's a bit too close to the crossguard. It should be 4 inches away, and that's about 3. So I could do with removing a little bit of weight from the pommel. Also, I'm not completely happy with the way it looks perched up on top there, like that. I think I'll put a small flat on it, mainly to bring it down for aesthetic reasons, but also to remove a little weight from the pommel. And I can report that adding clear parcel tape, 2-inch parcel tape, to the back of these sheets of paper makes them last far, far longer, and they give far more useful work. They always break long before the sandpaper's worn away. Let's try the balance now. Well, straight away I think it looks better. Balance feels the same to me. Yeah, it's made no difference. But that's as much as I'm prepared to take off. Okay. Now that the pommel is on, the last job is to remove the twine wrapping and see what sort of job I made of the leather hand grip. Not quite the elegant symmetry of the style I was attempting to emulate, but still, it's only my second ever sword and my first ever leather wrapped grip. Let's get it outside so we can have a look at it. And here's the finished sword. It's got an English made, or at least English sourced, stainless steel blade, an English mild steel crossguard, an American walnut handle, Japanese leather wrap to the handle, and a German pommel. I like the fact that the crossguard is made of mild steel, while the pommel's soft iron. And although it probably doesn't show on camera, they do have a subtly different tone to their sheen. This has never been sharpened. All I've ever done is grind the edges till they meet. So let's start with a stab, because I'm more confident of the success of a stab. Oh, that works. Okay, I'm going to go for a slash cut, two-handed. Yeah, you can tell it's never been sharpened. Ah well, I've made myself a stabbing weapon, if not a successful cutter. As we see here, it's quite a lot bigger than the other sword I made. In fact, the overall length of the new sword is 41 inches. The length of the blade's 33 inches. The width of the blade at the top is 1.9 inches. And the crossguard has a width of 8 inches. I think it's about the size of, say, a medieval arming sword. I hope you like the sword, and I hope you like the video. Thanks for watching.